Hey guys, this is Christina Barr here, and I'm gonna wait. Well, I'm gonna not gonna wait. I'm gonna keep going. So tonight, Time Magazine is going to announce their Person of the Year award. They've been doing it a long time. You don't necessarily. It's not about who's the best person or the worst person. It's just someone who's impacted the world, undoubtedly throughout the year. And I'm not surprised by the short list of the finalists, but I did want to talk about them for a little bit. And ultimately, I think that the president should win, and I'll go through those reasons. But I don't know what Time Magazine is going to announce, and they're not going to announce it until I believe 10 o'clock and like on NBC News or something like that. And I'm not going to do a live that late, so I'm going to just speculate and say who I think it should win, and I'll write an article on it, and you can look at it on Black T News. But undoubtedly, I think the president should um, receive this honor, I suppose, because for the past 4 years, everybody's just made the world about Trump, whether you love him, whether you hate him. It's just all been about Trump. He has far more power than a president should have in the sense of he can separate families. And I'm not talking about the border or anything like that. I'm talking about your mom likes Trump, so you can no longer like your mom. And that's way more power than anyone should really have in politics, but we decided to divide ourselves along those lines. And that's one reason why one of the many reasons that he should get it, because he's just been in the news. Undoubtedly, he can create any kind of story he wants from a tweet, and the media just goes haywire. If there's nothing to report, they'll report on something frivolous. I mean, remember when he was president elect and they freaked out because he went to go out to eat? And the media was like, how dare he do this? This is endangering democracy. If something happens to the president elect and we weren't there to report it, this would be just absolutely terrible. So stuff like that, the 2 scoops of ice cream, how he misfed the fish, the koi fish, um, just walking in front of the queen. They all kinds of stories about the president, and then there's the big stories, and then there's the fake news, and then just no, there's no way that he shouldn't be person of the year. But I don't know if they'll do that, because obviously there's some other big things that happened this year, and I'm not surprised by the short list, and I think it's a pretty good short list, actually, even though I have my very strong opinion about who should be the person of the year. I'm not going to lose sleep over it not being Trump, because I do think the other picks are quite notable. But before the other people who they said, Joe Biden, who is the least compelling out of the four on the short list. Obviously, right now he's the president elect, presumed going to be inaugurated January 20th. That's the presumption right now. There's still disputes in the court. There's a pretty interesting lawsuit happening right now with Texas and other states joining on, and alleging some stuff that is true as far as improprieties and some of the ways states like my state, Michigan, handled the election. What the courts will do, I'm not as optimistic as some of my friends on the right, but not saying that something won't happen, but like I'm just kind of more cynical these days, I guess. But we'll get to that probably tomorrow, and to talk about some of these things, but with going on with the election, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But right now, back to Joe Biden. I say he's the most not compelling person on this list because he wasn't anyone was excited about. He basically had to just hold on until he could, through the primaries, after he lost a couple ones in a row, and he got to like the South, and he got enough support, and he kept winning consistently. They made deals to get other people out of the race, and once they got enough people out of the race, someone like Bernie Sanders really couldn't keep the momentum once everybody else got off. And so he stayed in his basement a lot. The press didn't ask tough questions. They didn't have to ask tough questions. I mean, like, after the convention, they're like, the media is like in the front, and we're like, go outside and enjoy the fireworks, shoo. There's a video today of Jill Biden shooing like reporters off after they ask questions about Hunter Biden, which, oh surprise, there's a story there. They all know there's a story now. They're willing to acknowledge it, and he's being investigated by the FBI. So yeah, since they're now going to look at that, surprise surprise, but they didn't want to deal with that when he was actually running the election. So I'm not surprised. Are you surprised? I'm not. He stayed in his basement a lot. They did so many lids, like at 10 a.m., 9 a.m., 11 a.m. The most surprising one to me was after Ginsburg passed. And the day after Ginsburg passed, they did another lid. And at that point, I was like, is something wrong with this man? Because it was such a big story. It had such big implications for the country, for the Supreme Court. And that's the time to go out there and rally the troops, the Democrats. And he called a lid. So it was just really peculiar. It was really peculiar. And I was baffled by it, and it happened so many times, and he could just continuously get away with it. And so he just kind of skated by into having the position of the nomination, and skated by into the eventual win on election night, which is still being disputed up in the courts. If you say this on YouTube though, and Facebook, which is streaming on YouTube, so we'll see what happens. I'm not talking that much about it, but YouTube announced that if you say anything about fraud or kind of a contest the election results, and they're going to, at this point, they're just going to take down the video. And right now it won't be a strike on your account, but after I believe after the inauguration, or maybe it's even after the electoral college, they're going to start giving strikes on accounts. So that's interesting. I don't believe they never made such announcements for people on the internet, alleging Trump was illegitimate, or that the Russians like changed the election, and a bunch of other stuff. So it's interesting that they're willing to go so far for Joe Biden. And it just makes people more paranoid, actually, because when the Hunter Biden story broke with the New York Post, I don't think people would have paid much attention to the whole laptop story if the social media sites didn't start trying to censor it. And because they started censoring it so hard, and blocked New York Post page, and wouldn't let people tweet it out. And that's when people are like, maybe there's something more to this story. Because Rudy Giuliani finds a laptop that happens to be Hunter's laptop that he left in a shop. That sounds like a really weird story that is kind of too good to be true. And but they had the goods on there and kept leaking stuff. In the Biden campaign, they would say it's a smear, but they wouldn't really they specifically said they weren't spokespeople mentioned that they weren't disputing the validity of the actual like emails and stuff. And I'm like, well, there's your stuff right there. They're not denying that the stuff, that the emails and the correspondence and stuff are true. So, but the media just wouldn't bite, because they didn't want to have a repeat of 2016, when they started talking about Hillary's emails, and people point the finger and say, you guys are the ones that are the reason why she lost. And they didn't want that to be the reason why Biden perhaps lost. So it was a crazy story. I don't know if it got out there how much of a difference it would have made to the election at all, but it was super shady. So anyway, I do think Biden is pretty much the least compelling person, because he was basically like a meat shield that wasn't Donald Trump. And that's another reason why Trump, I believe, should be the person of the year, because it's the amazing amount of voter historic turnout that he had. I mean, 80,000 supposedly against him, and 74 for him, and people didn't go out to vote for Biden so much. I'm sure there's some people out there who like him, but we know it's mostly to drive, people were there to drive out Trump. And then there were so many people who showed up election day. I mean, there's so many people who did the vote mail and stuff, but just the pure numbers of the people who came out on election day to vote for Trump um was just incredible. And then the fact that people are still gung ho, he's still having rallies and just people still showing up by the thousands saying defend Trump and we love Trump, and would go to a rally in the snow, in the rain today, even with the election results being the way that it is. That is power. That is power. And I don't, even if the courts don't go his way, even if he's not really interested in running in 2024 again, which he could do that. um uh he still has a lot of power because he's so popular with the Republicans. And even if he wanted to concede election night, people would have been mad at him for doing it. He's like the head of the movement, but I don't think he could have said, guys, let's just calm this down. They would have been like, no, you have to do this. You have to look at all this stuff and you have to fight until like we feel is an acceptable amount. Like he can't even stop the train. The train is just gone. So I don't know if there's like I said, I don't mind the other picks. And I think it's a good short list for the 4 finalists, but I think definitely that he should get it. On to the other finalists. They have Dr. Anthony Fauci, and but he's not alone. It's like him and the other medical professionals. And then they also have George Floyd. I mean, well, I guess it's just like Black Lives Matter, the demonstrators in general. Personally, I don't like. I know they've had like groups or whatever be the person of the year, but I think the person should just be a person. And I think if you just had Dr. Anthony Fauci, that's a compelling enough. He's a compelling enough person to put on the list and perhaps take it. Because so many people really were so gaga over this guy. They were saying, trust the experts, trust the experts, trust the experts. And he was their go-to guy. And sometimes he butted heads a bit with the president, or people in the media tried to make it seem like he butted heads more often than not. I mean, they were especially kind of going, in sync at the beginning. And then as things got further on, there was kind of more disagreement. Now, he first was like, don't wear a mask. And then, of course, changed his position. He kind of got some flack. I mean, he got to go do the thing where he, pitched did opening pitch. But people were upset or noting that he made sure he wore his mask when he was not around anyone in the center, of the field throwing the pitch. But when he was up in the stands, he either didn't have his mask on, or it was pulled down or under his nose, or so he wasn't really using that appropriately. So people mention that with some of the stuff, it's a bit of could be a bit of a show. And he's gotten to it with like Rand Paul about how much we've been doing with the lockdowns. They got to pretty intense arguments about school openings and school closings, which he's now kind of come around like we need to make sure that we're open. And there's been some inconsistencies or rather change. You can say changes as information has kind of come out and changed, I suppose. It's funny that people are like, it's more than just the flu. With coronavirus, or when they get mad when people say that it's a deadlier flu, or if you mention flu in any kind of comparison, people get really upset. But Fauci actually penned an article early on with the pandemic talking about the mortality rate and saying that it's kind of like a really, really bad flu. And I actually mentioned that article and that stat on an article I believe I wrote on blacktnews.com, but also I mentioned it in my book Slay Your Fear when I was going over some of the media hype. And believe me, I'm not saying anything. obviously corona is deadly. It's real. It's impacted a lot of people. It's impacted people I know who are close to me, who I love, and but the government overreach is crazy. It's crazy that we've had with it, and I think that's really the main thing with people. There wasn't like enough risk assessment, and people were saying just trust these experts, but it's like no one elected them, and someone still has to stand up and make risk assessments. And the president, his at the end of the day, they put out regulations and guidelines, and they said, I mean, we're federalist system, and states have the right to decide how they're going to do different things. And he can't just be a dictator and rain down. And other people, I think, would have been tempted to kind of assess more power, but President Trump didn't do something like that. So so you had some states that were kind of more lax on some things, and you had states like Michigan and that right now where you can't go dine, in restaurants, but you can go dine in a tent restaurant. So you can dine inside as long as it's outside, but in like an igloo or something. So, it's just crazy. What's crazy about it, and Gretchen Whitmer was also considered for person of the year, and which I'm not surprised, because I mean she was considered for Joe Biden's VP pick. They talked quite a bit. I talked to some people who know Gretchen, and they claim that she really thought he was going to pick her, but Joe Biden could not pick her because he said a lot of things about Black people that were unsavory, and we can leave it at that today. So people, wrote to him and said you have to pick a Black person, which pretty much destroyed all of her hopes and dreams of that. But she was someone who was going at it with the president. He mentioned something, that woman from Michigan didn't even use her name, and became a big thing. But I really think that the media thought her and the women leading Michigan were such darlings because she's a Midwestern governor, and they want to keep portraying Trump as this misogynist, awful person. And as long as they keep, have like three ladies leading the state versus Trump, they can keep kind of going at it with that war. A lot of people who maybe may say she's doing a good job or will defend her really ask the question of what else could she have done, and they don't maybe see some of the more, I don't know, political callous kind of moves that she's made, or are putting the pieces together with some things that don't make sense. Like I think compliance was pretty good in Michigan until things just started not to make sense. Like you're already in the store, a big box store, and they're like, hey, you can't go buy flowers because that's not an essential item, or you can't buy seeds if you're in Walmart and you're already in there, and you want juice, and you want some seeds, but you can't go get it because it's not an essential item according to Whitmer. That's when things started to get weird, when the rules started to get inconsistent. Like you can't go out on your boat if it has a motor, but if you want a canoe, that's fine. And so it just seemed like these Republicans got crazy when the boating thing happened, and then they started the protests. And of course she was against the protest, but then she herself started the protest when the Black Lives Matter stuff started to break out. So there was some inconsistencies was there. So, and of course her husband with the boating incident, I won't get into today, but she I'm not surprised that they considered her. I'm glad she didn't make the short list, because I don't think her head can fit that much more ego inside of it. So another person, well, let's talk about like the demonstrator. So we know that this summer there were so many demonstrations and protests that happened, starting off because of what happened with George Floyd. And he was it took a while for the body cam to come out. It was something they tried to hold back. This case still well, I think it bothers everyone, but it still really, really concerns me, because my gut feeling is I think he's going to get off, because I think they shot too high with the charges. And I don't want to see. Hopefully we won't have any more chaos like to what we've had with the looting and the rioting and the burning of the buildings and all that other stuff. But I can imagine some bad stuff happening if that verdict comes in. And well, and they hid the body cam for a while, and it was actually leaked. And I don't know if you've seen it, and I won't play it on here because it's just kind of long and disturbing. You guys can go look at it yourself. But it's really made me sick just watching the whole thing go down and just knowing what happened to him. And knowing that, seeing each step he took, like getting out of the car. And he was saying, he couldn't breathe. And before he got on the ground, he was kind of hissing a lot when they were, handcuffing him and putting his arms behind his back. So the cops probably had it in their heads that, sometimes they arrest people and they deal with people and they just talk. And they tried to get him in a car. For a while he was saying he was claustrophobic. They finally got him in the car. He climbed out of the car onto the ground and said he'd rather be on the ground. And that's just like when my stomach like just totally just sank, and I was just sick watching it, knowing what was bound to happen. And when the officer they were waiting for like paramedics and stuff to arrive, they knew he was on drugs. He's on fentanyl and some other stuff. And he had his knee on his neck. And he ended up dying, suffocating. And the drugs absolutely didn't help, but neither did the knee on the neck. And absolutely for several minutes he had his knee on his neck that way. And it was something that really shook the nation. And but I do know that they had that in their manual as a way to restrain people. So I think at the end of the day, the cop's gonna claim he didn't do anything that wasn't against his training. And I think I just pray for the nation, I guess, is what I have to say. I wouldn't try to brace myself for a guilty verdict with that. I'm just I'm concerned about it. So anyway, it was something that really shook the nation, and it sparked all these conversations, and it sparked these protests. I remember when Candace Owens said her comment about George Floyd, and I was like, whoa. When she started listing some of the things that he did. And I was uncomfortable with it. And I did a little video on Facebook about it on my personal page. Because I'm like, you can still talk about black on black crime and all that stuff without saying all that other stuff. At the end of the day, he is, still somebody's family and so on. Even with like the bad things that he did. And he wasn't asking to be made a martyr, but people were making murals and all this other stuff to him. So people were taking it really far. And his family was saying, don't burn down stuff. Don't do all this crazy stuff that people were doing. But the movement just kind of outpaced him. So I think it would have been appropriate to just have him be the person of the year without adding on all the demonstrators. Because like I said, I don't like the idea of a person not actually being a person. And I think it's a worthy person on the short list regardless. But after that, it was there, not all of them were violent not every demonstration broke out in riots. It was a very small number, but the riots that broke out, of course, were huge. That did a lot of property damage, destroyed a lot of businesses, a lot of black owned businesses, and did people a lot of harm. People were saying if you complained about it, they would say you don't care about black lives. You value things over black lives. But rioting obviously doesn't bring people back. They had no right to steal all those things, destroy all those businesses, to be violent. People died in those riots. Officer Dorn died, and there were other people and that passed away during all those things. And people stole Gucci bags. They stole shoes. One woman got away with an entire cheesecake from the Cheesecake Factory. That is not a joke. So people were just using an excuse to be just wild and out. There were riots that broke out after Rayshard Brooks, the man who fell asleep at the Wendy's, who was compliant until it was apparent he was going to jail. And that sparked, big outrage and conversations. Um, and then there was Jacob Blake in Wisconsin, and who that was really controversial because he allegedly digitally raped the woman's house he was at, and was speeding off with kids that I suppose he shouldn't have had. And that case, all these cases are, still pending about what's going to happen. We'll see what's going to happen. But I thought it was wild that Biden and Kamala went to go see him and were told him they were proud of him. He got away with his life and is paralyzed, and so hopefully he can do something positive with it, with what's left of it. But that was another wild story. But it became so much that people just started acting off of fake news with the shootings. Like, stuff tried to break out in Detroit, and we had, good local police and stuff that just would not, at least as far as this issue goes, as far as not letting stuff break out, because you had people who were traveling state to state to start chaos, and they just would not allow that to happen. There were like judges that tried to say that you can't use tear gas and all this other stuff. They didn't even want to like people zip tie people too tight and all this other stuff. And they're just like, we're just going to keep trying to protect and serve the people and do our jobs. And I'm glad for that. And there there was one man who actually turned a gun on himself, and people still rioted. So it became apparent that it was just something that people wanted to do. And there were people who had demonstrations, and of course, nothing went wrong, nothing went bad. I had friends who went to those things. I had some family that went to those things, and they didn't necessarily consider themselves a part of Black Lives Matter in any kind of association. They just kind of went because they thought it was important to go. But as people started digging more into Black Lives Matter, they saw that it was not a good group. And they had a lot of like Marxist ties. And the co-founders say that they were trained Marxists. I already knew that the group wasn't good. I researched them when they first came out years ago, and the stuff on their website and stuff they were saying didn't hit right. And I was surprised that they still had some similar kind of things from what I originally read on their What We Are About page. And so they wanted to disrupt the nuclear family, cisgender privilege, and defund the police. And I don't want the police defunded. When my sister argues with people about defunding the police, she always says, I want to make sure that whatever number it is for them to be paid, to make sure that when I call, they're in here quickly. That's what number I want them to be paid. And if you can take away the budget a little bit and they're still going to get here in X amount of minutes, good. If you taking away their money is going to hinder them getting here in X amount of minutes, that's bad. What matters is, are they going to show up when I call? And the Democrats had to kind of pull back on that defund stuff because it pulled badly. And eventually they're like, oh my gosh, Black people want the police. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And we call the police when we need them. So I think it's very possible that the demonstrators could win Person of the Year. Again, I don't really like the idea of a Person of the Year being a big group. But if they just wanted to solely give it to George Floyd, I would understand. And whether you would say he's not a good guy because he held a gun to a pregnant woman's belly and allegedly and all this other stuff, that's not really what the it's for. If a person did an impact, and 100% this man impacted the country, what happened to him set us off with a lot of conversations, a big movement. Whether you like Black Lives Matter or not, which I obviously do not. And I say obviously because I've talked about it a lot. but I think it's a worthy finalist, a worthy finalist. And I think Fauci is a worthy finalist, and but he's paired with the frontline workers, so like the nurses and in I mean I guess frontline is uh because it was used so broadly sometimes, but I mean I believe they believe it's like the doctors and the nurses and the EMT workers and so on, firefighters and so on. Well, I guess probably just really the nurses and the doctors, but I when you get a great nurse, first of all, it's the restrictions and stuff with the hospital and have been really rough on the people who work there and the families who can't see their loved ones. I'm not really interested in watching like The Good Doctor and other things that are doing like COVID stories, because it's just frankly a bit painful and annoying to relive the thing that we haven't finished living yet. And I'm like, can we get some diversity on the TV, some creativity? Like, why is everyone doing a COVID story? Like, I know we're all living it and it's relevant, but I'm just over it right now. Um, and when you get great nurses that'll talk with you and help you and kind of try to, you know, sympathize, it's great. It's not when you get others that are just kind of, I want to feeling the heaviness of the moment, I guess. It can be a nightmare when you're on the other side of the phone just wondering what's going on with your loved one in the hospital that you can't see. And it's just been a huge trial for everyone involved. And but right now it seems like the media has a bit of a fetish with um hosting nurses that have been complaining about their patients. It's really odd, it's really weird, and I don't know if it's all for propaganda's sake or because it's good clicks. I don't know, but they had one nurse that was complaining and saying that she had patients that were she was an doctor, not a ICU doctor. But she was saying that there are people dying, not believing they had COVID, and as they're dying, gasping for their last breath, that they're saying, "I can't believe this is happening." And if they're gasping with their last breaths, I just don't imagine that that's the thing that they might say, this can't be happening, but I doubt that people are saying, I can't believe this is real as they're dying. That's what they're using their last breaths to say. And this particular nurse that they had on CNN, that her post went viral. Wired did an article researching the area she lived around and calling around in different hospitals, and they were saying that her story wasn't their reality from what they saw. And also they mentioned, you know, the hospital where she appeared to work at didn't have many cases of COVID, you know, compared to like a lot of other cases, and the deaths weren't that many either. So I question whether those experiences are true. And I'm sure it's got to be real in some cases, but I think some of these people are, I know, exaggerating for clicks. And there was one that was going kind of viral tonight that I saw, I think was in New York Times, reaching out, or maybe it was CNN again, reaching out, and I went through their page, and they were like pretty hardcore leftists and stuff. And I'm like, that doesn't mean the story is not true, but it just seems to be a pattern. I hate how all this stuff gets so, I know I'm a political commentator, but I just hate how all this stuff gets so political. Because when all of this started, I did feel like it was time for the nation to come together. Like we were all going to work together to solve the problem. You know, Trump was like, we're going to build this hospital ship. We're going to send to New York. We're going to build the ventilators. People were making masks. They were sending it to nurses. Like I had a friend who makes custom bow ties. He makes great stuff. Dapper on Arrival. If you're watching my show and you're like, oh, I gotta boycott this person because this person's a conservative, they're not even like political or anything like that. So don't even feel like that. It's just my friend and they make good stuff and I just wanted to advertise them really quick. But anyway, they started making masks and they were sending it to nurses and donate, and they would make other masks for people and they donate the proceeds and stuff. And people were just doing great work for each other. They were building, up the hospitals in like Cobo Hall, and they were here in Michigan and I believe the Novi Expo Center and other places, and they were trying. You had some good Samaritan's Purse who built a little hospital in New York and other places, and people were just attacking the problem, and they were like, they didn't want the hospitals to be overwhelmed, and they were doing their best to try to prepare for this, and I felt like, this is the time Americans come together and we try to get stuff done to make it through the problem. And when the lockdowns and stuff were happening, it's like, my gosh, how are people going to deal with 15 days of not being able to work? And people were, I remember the day before the shutdown started, I was in Red Lobster, which isn't my favorite place to go to. So I regret that was like my last meal before the shutdown, but I do love some cheddar biscuits though. And we were watching the news, and they just, I think, announced stuff in Ohio, and we were kind of expecting something to go down in Michigan, and then the waitresses were just so concerned about what was going to happen to them. And they had reason to be concerned because a lot of restaurants didn't make it, a lot of small businesses didn't make it, and we're now back, not being able to go out to eat and stuff again. But people were determined to try and make it through, but it was hard, like in Michigan and other places, like the unemployment site wasn't working, and people couldn't log on, people couldn't get their benefits, people waited a long time. My sister still has 2 weeks missing. She'll just probably never get that back. People had to be let go. Some companies couldn't pay, some companies could pay, but their employees, like the whole time, like companies like Nike, I think Converse paid their people the whole time, but just at a lower rate. And people were just doing their best to get through it. But when stuff started to get weird, like with like the inconsistencies and who people were deeming essential, and it was going on obviously longer than the 15 days. And in the case of like Michigan, the governor just kept flexing her own power. The legislative body, which should have, I don't know, I guess done more to try to tamper it down. They were like, at one point they sent her a letter that was like, will you please, we'll go ahead and grant you another extension, but you have to promise us that you'll work with us next time. And Whitmer's team like leaked the letter. She's so vindictive. And they were just like, I can't believe she did this, that she leaked, like they leaked our correspondence and about this. We're like, no one's ever done anything like this. And which I didn't think it made her look good, but maybe she knew that the Republican base would just kind of roll their eyes at Republicans. So even though it didn't put their people in the best light, it made the Republicans look like punks too. Cause it just kind of sounded like kind of begging, like, we'll give you this another extension, but you got to promise that we'll work together next time. And she basically, ruled the state with an iron fist until the Supreme Court said she couldn't. And then now they have the health department saying what you can and can't be open. So unless they push something through a lawsuit that goes through the Supreme Court quickly, they're probably going to be able to do whatever they want to do, because our Michigan Supreme Court, we lost a conservative judge. So maybe 2, I can't remember. So anyway, there's not a conservative majority. So if something goes all the way back to her, I don't know how good it's going to go for Michigan. So hopefully the dark winter, as Joe Biden described, doesn't last too long. But yeah, everybody I think was like gung ho about, we can do this, we can get through this, but it started going so long, and then Trump's like approval numbers were ticking up, and I think people started to kind of freak out a bit and still remembered, like, hey, we have an election, and you saw people saying, like Newsom and other people saying, hey, this is like a time to change things. And at first, all these people were saying Trump was doing a good job. It's kind of funny for all the people turn around and said, no, he didn't do, a good job, or was always awful, or they never got what they needed, when they're on tape with press, like asking them, like, it seemed like they were just nudging, like, will you please say something bad about Trump? And they're like, they answer our phone calls, they give us what we need. Right now they're doing okay. and and then it eventually just changed, and everything got so political, like with the hydroxychloroquine, that story about the couple who took the fish tank cleaner, and people blaming it on Trump, and there was just all kinds of hysteria. Like there was a Democrat who swears that the medicine saved their life, and they got censured by the Democrats for just trying to survive. So COVID took just like such a negative turn, and it just became so partisan, and with the masks, and it just got so bad. And which is unfortunate, because like I said, I really felt like we were all in this together, and someone made a decision, and it was the mainstream media that decided, like, hey, this lovey-dovey stuff, at the end of the day, that's not going to be good for politics, so we need to start dividing the nation. And they're the ones who were sowing the seeds, and how they were asking questions to the governors who were Democrats, and they wanted him to say something bad about Trump. And when they did a story, it was Bloomberg News, about the hydroxychloroquine, and they're like, if you take this too much of this medicine, it will kill you. And it's like, when is that not true about it? Like just about any medicine, that if you take too much, it will kill you. And so there's just so much fear mongering that happened throughout this whole ordeal. And even like with the debates, and they're like, in the vaccines, and Kamala and Biden were acting like, I don't know about the vaccine, I don't trust it if Trump did it. And then the media, like the debate, they're like, you say there's a vaccine coming, that's what you've been saying, you said this and it didn't happen, you said this didn't happen. And he's like, no, we're close, and it will probably happen before the end of the year. And so as soon as like it's announced that Joe Biden is like the president-elect, is like, oh, what do you know, this company in Michigan has this virus, and it's like it has this vaccine, it's like 94% or 90%, I think it was at the time, and they got it up a bit, effective. And which you can't tell me that Whitmer didn't know about that. And then she put out a statement like, oh, we're so proud of this Michigan company, and we're so glad to work with Joe Biden about in saving America and all this other stuff. And it's just so funny that that they would write a letter like that. And like the person on the Piltzfer company, one person who used to be on that company was a part of Joe Biden's cancer nonprofit. So I don't know, these all people all kind of travel in the same circles. And it's crazy how just all the stuff came out, but it's like, it's ready, end of the year, like Trump said, and some people gave the credit to the Operation Warp Speed, but it wasn't politically expedient to give him his credit before the election. And like, it's just a shame that a lot of people have died, a lot of people are still dying, are sick, have suffered. And it just became so political. And to the people, if you say, well, what about these people doing these protests about their rights and all this? They have their rights. They're totally entitled to that, and people should at least respect that, because it's where our nation is built on the Constitution, and they have their right to assemble. They should be able to say how many people come in the house. And I understand that we're in a situation where like I said, people are sick, but people still need their rights, and they don't just go away. And it's in tough times when we need to protect them. So anyway, back to the nurses. I would understand if Fauci and the nurses won Person of the Year, but back to the president, so much of what he said, so much of what he did, like if you believe the original numbers where it would have been impossible that millions could have died, you could say the president saved millions. If you believe that he didn't do enough, and if you're one of those people who are like 200,000 people have died and it's his fault, I think that you're an awful person for saying it that way. Because obviously Well, first they were saying that estimate basically was if they did everything correctly, that was about as many people who were going to die from this virus, probably. And there was a big chunk of people who got the virus, contracted it in nursing homes at one point in time. Like, this was during the fall, or maybe a little early in the summer, that like New York Times and other people reported that for over 40% of the deaths were linked to nursing homes. And we don't know quite how many had passed away in nursing homes who contracted it in New York, because if you died out, you might have got sick in the nursing home, but if they sent you away like to the hospital or something, they wouldn't count it. And it's just incredible that he put a book out on leadership and he's getting an Emmy. It's so laughable. Gretchen Whitmer, we don't know how many people in Michigan actually passed from this. Newsom had like nursing home policies. I think in New Jersey as well, and then I think in Pennsylvania. So there are people who did a lot of wrong. And so if you're one of those people who are like, every death lays at the feet of Trump, if you want to say that because he's the president, and you believe the buck stops with him, I guess I can understand that. But if you're really being driven by your political hatred, or then you're just kind of sick. You're sick to stand on the graves of the people who passed away to just dunk on your political opponents. And it doesn't sound like you really care about accountability if you don't care about how these deaths happen, and you just want to dunk on Trump. And because at the end of the day, if you're the governor, you run your state. You run your state, and there's only so much that a president can do about how people are running states. Like, you saw how people run their states with an iron fist, like Gretchen Whitmer. Like, they tried to pass a bill to have people stop going to nursing homes, and she vetoed the darn bill. So why? I don't know. And then people try to say, no, people in nursing homes are only going if, they live there and that's their home. That's not even true. That's not true. They sent young people in nursing homes who had COVID. They sent people who didn't live there, people who weren't that old, who had COVID there. I had a relative who went to a nursing home and had to call the police, 911, to take her back to a hospital because they weren't actually taking good care of her, and she caught a pneumonia. So there's a lot of bad policies and things to reflect on. But a lot of people were saying the 200,000. I would see it all the time on the internet. So even if you said something like that and believe Trump was awful and did a terrible job and in his leadership, whether you believe it was good or bad, it's still, everything revolves around him again. And that's why I think he should be person of the year. So yeah. So I talked about the 4 people on the top of the list, and they'll announce it tonight at 10 o'clock. I'm not terribly excited. I mean, I think I'm correct in who I think should get it, and I'm not gonna lose sleep over it or anything. But I just thought this would be a different kind of segment to talk about. And they did announce already who got entertainers of the year, and I totally agree with the entertainer of the year, which is BTS. If you're not familiar with BTS, they are a Korean boy group, and they dance. Some of them, there's a rapper on there. They sing. They're kind of in like hip hop, pop kind of stuff, and they can drop a video and it'll have millions, hundreds of millions of views, like nothing. And they started forming the formation in like 2010, and they didn't, like, I don't think, come out to like 2013. And you're like, well, why did it take so long? Like, these people are so serious about their pop music. They like train these people nonstop. It is really, I mean, the music industry is a tremendous industry, and if you've ever seen like Making the Band or anything like that, you know that they put these people through a lot. But it's like, that is like nothing compared to what they do in Korea to forge these singers from fire and to package them and to make them global superstars. And came out with a new album this year. They were at the VMAs. They um you did all kinds of different shows, and they like launched an app, I think, teaching people Korean. They participated with on YouTube a lot, congratulating people with like their graduations and stuff like that. People just think they're adorable and they like their music. I can only think of one song that I really like, and Don't Burn Me at the Stake, if you like BTS. Mic Drop is great. Um, so I really like that song. That's not on their current album. I haven't listened to a thing, but they're around so much. I'm not really surprised that they got entertainer of the year. I think, I don't know, they probably considered someone else like Cardi B. She had a really big hit song. She obviously interviewed Joe Biden. She got into a match with Candace Owens, who just totally thrashed her. And that was great. And she tried to raise some money for like for people during COVID and stuff. And she talked to bragged about it on Twitter the other day, but it turns out that like she partnered with like a Cash App, but actually like Square was the people who was giving out money. It wasn't actually Cardi B's money. So the more you know. But I think BTS really deserved entertainment of the year. And LeBron James got athlete of the year, and they won another championship. He said this one was more important than all the other ones. I guess because of Black Lives Matter and some of the stances they took, they put it on the courts and everything else. I really hate how sports got so political, and I think at a time when the country just has so much stuff going on that they would have liked to have just sat and relaxed and enjoyed the world. And you got all this stuff. So they had really low ratings. And they tried to boycott, and then they like ended their boycott so easily. It was laughable. So, but I'm not surprised they gave it to King James. But I would think a better person, even though they weren't around much for 2020, would have been Kobe. Who passed away in January during a tragic accident, him and his daughter. And the world was, I mean, I'm not really big into sports that much, but of course know who these people are. And there's some people who were just absolutely devastated about it. And then it sparked this really cool movement, which was like Girl Dad, and dads just talking about how they were proud of their girls and their dads were proud of their daughters, and what it takes to be a dad raising a daughter. So much that feminists kind of started to get annoyed by it. And so I guess they were doing something right. So yeah, I'm a little surprised that they didn't, for the sake of it, give it to Kobe. And I mean, I know it happened super early in the year, but and obviously he didn't achieve something sports wise, but he was someone who was so important to the sports community, and it hit people so hard. And the fact that he died with his daughter, that was really hard for the family, and it was hard for people to take because it was so tragic. And so I was a little surprised that it wasn't him. But yeah, those are the nominees of Person of the Year. What do you guys think? I'm assuming most people probably think I'm correct. Some people are saying Trump will win. Why do I think Trump should win? I think because he impacts the world so always. And so people are saying, how did he deserve to win? Like, he's the world, like our nation just kind of evolves around him, good or bad decisions they did. What about, for example, peace deals were great. The economy was great until the COVID stuff happened. He was obviously the leader of the free world while all this was going down. He had to. The fact that he had to deal with this crisis and then he actually caught COVID. I mean, so much of the news cycle was just surrounding him all the time. He was so much of our oxygen was just devoted to Trump and the love of Trump, the hatred of Trump. good or bad, whether you love him or you hate him. I just don't know how anyone can say, what did he do to deserve it? He is the conversation. And even though Biden, is the president elect right now, and it'll probably be inaugurated on the 20th. Please don't hate me for saying that. I'm just saying that's the way that it looks. Obviously, it's still being disputed in the courts, and Supreme Court's gonna hear the case with the lawsuit with Texas and other states against Michigan and Pennsylvania and Georgia. But people are still willing to go to Trump rallies and have rallies, and they're doing these stop the steals. And if Trump has a rally on January 20th, and while Joe Biden is being sworn in, people will still go, and he'll still have thousands of people to show up. There's just no denying how much he's impacted the world and been in the media and the hearts and minds of people, driving people together and then driving people apart, families apart. Like I said, when I first began this podcast, he has more power than any president should have probably had. The power. And it's not something that he tried to have. It's something that we gave him, where your mom can be for Trump, and then you have to hate your mom, you have to hate your parents, and it drives people away. I've seen people say that I'm not going to let my grandparents see my parents see their grandkids if they vote for Trump. Just crazy stuff. And the turnout of the election was so insane. And it wasn't because Biden is compelling, because he's not. If they may give it to Biden tonight for person of the year, but he's the person who should have it the least, because he had the least to do with the actual win. It was all about people who love Trump and a referendum on Trump, people who wanted to see him go, the orange man bad, and people who are like, I believe Trump is saving democracy. And of course, there's a lot of people in between that number, but people on the different ends of the spectrum are so intense. So I don't know how you can argue that he should not be person of the year. You cannot like him. I mean, they've had bad people be person of the year. If you're someone who's like, Trump is that awful, terrible person, they don't always have good people be person of the year. It's just good or bad. These people have impacted the world. And there's just no getting around the fact that he has. Yeah, someone that's funny. Joe Biden is brilliant. He figured out how to have a campaign even in the basement. Well, it worked, I guess. Okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here. Again, you guys can go to blacktnews.com to read articles, to look at some more news, and to see some cool merchandise. I have this really cool Trump shirt. Well, it's not Trump shirt. It's GOAT. And you got Washington, Lincoln, Reagan, and Trump on there. So go ahead and look at that and some other merchandise that I have on blacktnews.com. And thank you guys for joining me tonight. And I'll be seeing you tomorrow.